This is PTV Pulse. I am Syed SHABAHAT and you're watching Fault Lines. On 22nd of September, Pakistan's Prime Minister Anwarul Haqqar made a speech at UNGA. Pakistan's diplomatic narrative has been going to United Nations with utmost consistency. Pakistan once again reiterated its firm belief that the issue of Kashmir has to be sorted out through an independent plebiscite under the watch of United Nations, something that made the Indians extremely uneasy. Pakistan also reminded the global community of the plight of the people of Palestine. And this is happening at the time when major supporters of the Palestinian cause have started improving their ties with the state of Israel. Also, he spoke about the sustainable development goals, international peace and security, and the economic recovery that Pakistan is planning. But most importantly, he talked about the catastrophic flash floods of last year, an outcome of the climate change that has devastated Pakistan's infrastructure. Prime Minister told the community of the global nations that Pakistan's losses surpassed $30 billion. And yet, very little has trickled down in form of help and support from the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, my first guest in the program is Dr. Mujahid Gilani. Dr. Mujahid is president of Kashmir Youth Alliance and an independent Kashmiri analyst. Dr. Mujahid, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Mujahid, as a representative of the voice of youth of Kashmir, what are your immediate thoughts about Pakistan's representation of Kashmir's case in the UNGA?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, thank you for taking me on this very important issue. See, one of the most important things about UNGA is essentially that UNGA is a huge conglomeration of nearly almost all the countries in the world that sit together at least once in a year. And as we know, that the third world countries in particular and the issues pertaining to the Muslims, if I talk specifically, are somehow underrated, particularly when we talk about the issue of Palestine or the long-standing issue of Jammu and Kashmir. So Pakistan's involvement, Pakistan's representation by the caretaker Prime Minister was very well taken. And as we know, the speech that he delivered at the UNGA did consist of a portion regarding the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. And the way the Prime Minister actually took up the issue is commendable as well. I wouldn't be going into how much of the context or how much of the content in his speech was related to the on-ground situation, but taking India to the forefront, projecting India's atrocities that are being committed in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is very important in this current international milieu, where we see that India is fast hugging the developed countries. It is going into different economic corridors. It is going to different financial pacts with the United States, the United Kingdom, and the other European countries as well. Lately, India just held the G20 summit in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, as well as in the mainland India. So in this current international milieu, the way the Prime Minister did take up the conflict of Jammu and Kashmir, I believe it should be appreciated.
But many of his critics are of the view that since he is not a regular Prime Minister, he has not been voted by the people, he's an interim Prime Minister, he should not have gone to UNGA. What are your remarks to this criticism made by his critics?
See, when you're asking this question from a Kashmiri who belongs to the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, for us, these dignitaries, the people in the offices, Highland offices, are actually representing Pakistan itself. As for a Kashmiri, if you talk about it, it is important and imperative that Pakistan, the state of Pakistan, talks about Kashmir to whichever forum is available. Therefore, the Prime Minister representing Pakistan is important. And Pakistan taking up the issue of Kashmir at such a huge congregation where almost all the countries were present is very important, regardless of him being a caretaker, regardless of the context of his speech that was related to the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I believe that the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, the current caretaker Foreign Minister, as well as the current caretaker Prime Minister, did a good job.
And many people ask, why do Pakistan keep reiterating the issue of Kashmir every time in all such forums?
See, as we heard the speech of the caretaker Prime Minister, you must understand that he did differentiate between two things: terrorism, that essentially has inflicted Pakistan very badly, and the freedom struggle, the very just freedom struggle that is currently going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So this is very important because at this point in time, the blending of terrorism with the freedom fights that are going on around the world is very common, particularly by the huge and big powers, the prosperous countries, essentially tell the same line as India does. But Pakistan continually reiterating, continually hammering to the world that whatever is going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is not only backed by the United Nations resolutions, but also backed by the prosperous, by the movers and shakers of the world as well. The whole world has been saying that they are fighting against terrorism. Pakistan has essentially given its lives, its wealth, its place, its economy against terrorism. And Pakistan stands against the state-sponsored terrorism by India that is being carried out in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So this hammering is very important, regardless of whether the world listens to Pakistan or not. But if this narrative that is essentially being given across by the people of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is not delivered by Pakistan, the world is bound to forget the sacrifices of the people of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Dr. Mujahid very rightly pointed out, he also highlighted the issue of Hindutva in Narendra Modi's India, which is causing problems for the innocent minorities of India, be these Christians, be these Dalits, be these Muslims, be these Sikhs. Everyone is facing the problems caused by the Hindutva's mindset. How do you see Prime Minister's remarks of bringing Hindutva at the forefront of his speech?
You see, as far as I'm concerned, or if we talk about the youth of the Jammu and Kashmir, particularly of the ground, we must understand that this is an ideological war. Pakistan has been standing with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, not because it's a humanitarian issue, not because it's a territorial problem, but because of the very clear ideological aspect of the freedom struggle that is going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And the most important thing that we must understand is that the people on the ground are sacrificing for this ideology. They're not essentially sacrificing for the land of Pakistan, that they want to essentially merge the land of Jammu and Kashmir with that of Pakistan. And that is the very same stance of the late Sayyid Ali Gilani Shaheed as well. If the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the caretaker PM, spoke about the Hindutva policy of the current Modi regime, this must be understood and taken as a policy of India itself. We understand that India is carrying out human rights violations in the mainland India against the minorities as well, be it the Dalits, be it the Christians, or be it any other community related as well. We have seen Sikhs also raising this flag of freedom against India too. So the Prime Minister of Pakistan took up this issue as a global part, partisan, that the terrorism, the fascist regimes, and the extremist regimes all across the world, particularly in India, should be taken to task.
Now, that actually reminds me of the issue that Canada has recently faced, where a Canadian Sikh has been assassinated, for which the Canadian government believe all the intelligence and all the evidence is pointing out that there was an involvement of India in this event. How do you see this development?
You see, Canada has essentially shown the mettle. Canada has told India very clearly that it will not tolerate any violation of its sovereignty, and particularly the murder of Canadian nationals on the Canadian soil as well. Lately, we have seen, as we talk about this particular topic, it's the Hardeep Singh Najjar's murder, but lately Sukhdev Singh as well was murdered on Canadian soil. And Canada has taken very strict actions regarding it as far as the diplomatic measures are concerned. So we must understand that if a nation, if a country such as Canada has essentially outspoken India, has essentially projected India as a terrorist nation, some as a country which has essentially carried out a killing, a murder without any trial on a land that doesn't belong to it is very important. And this is the very same stance I believe that Pakistan has been taking for the past many years, telling the world that India is essentially carrying out terrorist activities inside Pakistan as well. And Kulbhushan Yadav is one of the major examples of it, of which the former foreign minister Bilawal Bhutto had also talked about, even on the Indian media.
Dr. Mujahid, taking advantage of your presence in the show, will you kindly tell us about the plight of people of Kashmir? While Pakistan was representing and fighting their case again at UNGA, what is happening to the innocent Muslims of Indian illegally occupied valley of Jammu and Kashmir?
I'm glad that you actually asked this question. Today, as we talk about it, just yesterday, Mirwais Maulvi Umar Farooq was released by the puppet government of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and he delivered a sermon in the main Jamia Masjid of Srinagar. I believe the more important lines that need to be highlighted are that Kashmiris are essentially a peaceful people. But whenever Kashmiris are helped, whenever Kashmiris are pushed against the wall, we have been very rightfully taking the guns as well, just to ask for our right of self-determination, for the birthright essentially that has been bestowed upon by nature and by United Nations as well. So Mirwais Maulvi Umar Farooq yesterday talked about how India has essentially been violating the human rights in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Although we are a peaceful nation, but since India has been violating our rights, we have been putting up a resistance against India as well. And this is more or less the same thing that the Prime Minister, the caretaker Prime Minister, talked about in the UNGA as well. That whenever India has committed war crimes in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the Kashmiris have resisted. So you can see that the two lines, one from the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir on the ground, Mirwais Maulvi Umar Farooq says almost the same statement, and the caretaker Prime Minister of Pakistan also delivers more or less the same message to the people, to the UNGA countries, talking about Kashmir. So the voice from the ground transcends the borders, goes to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and is being delivered at the UNGA.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mujahid Gilani, for being guest in our show.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister also spoke about many other issues, in addition to talking about the plight of Muslims in the Valley of Kashmir. So to talk about these additional issues that the Prime Minister addressed at UNGA, I have invited Syed Osama Rizvi. Osama is a leading expert in the field of geoeconomics and also talk about the political economy of the subcontinent. Osama, I welcome you to the show. Osama, what does the speech of the Prime Minister of Pakistan tell you about Pakistan's foreign policy? Do you find consistency in Pakistan's diplomatic narrative, as I pointed out in the starting of my show?
So the overall speech at the UN, I think it was promising. I think it had a future forward-looking orientation to it. It had a problem-solving inclination. The overall feel was quite positive, and I think specifically it is important to mention that Pakistan, being the representative of other countries like Pakistan from the global south, from the developing part of the world, I think the concerns raised for Islamophobia, the concerns raised against climate change and higher interest rates in the global macroeconomic environment, I think that was very timely, relevant, and quite positive. So yeah, the overall speech was really good.
One of the key areas of concern, Osama, according to the Prime Minister, is the issue of permanent members of Security Council. He didn't name India directly, but he was looking quite concerned about the increase in members of Security Council. What's your take on it?
So Pakistan, countries like Pakistan are concerned that if the members of UNSC, or for that matter any other organization increase, then they would have to deal with multiple opinions of different countries' representatives. And at this moment, where the world is bifurcated into countries that have voted for against the Russia-Ukrainian war, against Russians, and those who have not. So the world is divided, bifurcated into two blocks. Bloomberg Intelligence has actually evidence-based data on it. So there is a thing called geopolitical distance that is growing between countries, and I'm speaking about my own field, which is global economy. So if you have a lot of members in UNSC, and once again for that matter in any other economic bloc or international organization, then the decisions can have a lot of noise in them, and it'll be difficult to find signals for countries like Pakistan. So our economic growth, the potential to, let's say, give us aid, the potential to receive developmental projects, the potential to receive support in international issues, and all of these other things can get quite blurry in case these members continue to increase. If they are compact, if they are as they are right now, and no new members are added, then this would remain a less problematic project overall. So I think that was my own take, is that this was one of the concerns for Pakistan for mentioning to critical the UNSC members at this point.
Osama, the issue of climate change was also discussed, and he reminded the global community about the catastrophic losses Pakistan faced just last year because of the climate issues. Your take on it?
Climate issues, this actually, if you ask me, the issue of climate change, overall climatic issues, that is one of the factors that actually warrants a separate speech of its own. I would like to give you a very interesting statistic from a book called The Divide by Jason Hickel, a book that I think should be part of our curriculum. It is that much relevant to countries like Pakistan. So he mentions that about around 588 billion tons of carbon dioxide was emitted up until 2017. Out of that, 70% was emitted or came from the source of which was the industrialized economies, the developed countries, the advanced economies. However, and this is very interesting, and this is where it relates to Pakistan, 83% of the deaths happening because of this rising CO2 emissions were in the lowest emitting countries. And now you see that why I gave this example, because Pakistan, despite contributing to less than 1% in the global carbon emissions, have faced floods of biblical proportions. We have lost a lot of our livestock, exacerbating the already present food crisis. We have our crop yields have been affected. The food systems are fragile at the moment. And there was another report by Oxfam, and I'm mentioning these because to support the fact that why it was important for Pakistan to mention climate change as a separate point, a separate argument in the speech, because Oxfam Carbon Inequality 2030 report that highlights that the emissions by the 1% wealthiest, which is 70 million people, are 15%, 15-20%, which is more than, which is more than the 3.5 billion people on Earth. So what 3.5 billion people on Earth emit, that is more, the 1%, the 70 million people emit more than them. This is insane, and I think this was very important for Pakistan. And when Pakistan says this, they also speak for other countries as well. And this is an issue that requires global effort. And this is also an issue where I would want to say that the international support or the international community could be held more responsible than our internal affairs. Of course, there needs to be better management of the food. Our 26% of food production goes to waste because of less food storages, the role of the middleman, hoarding, and all these things. But still, the role of international community within this sphere, it cannot be avoided.
Osama, Prime Minister also spoke about the economic recovery, and when he says about economic recovery, it also demonstrate the steps that Pakistan have so far taken to stand in compliance with the demand of International Monetary Fund. What do you believe have been Pakistan's performance in the realm of economics?
Economic recoveries, I know that the speech, as I said, was quite promising and it had a solution-oriented approach, but I still believe that there will remain a lot of challenges in the coming months, and I think it will not be until the mid of 2024 that we will see some sort of relief. As of now, we have the possibility of another tariff hike in the electricity prices. Petrol prices at the pump might be touching 400 Pakistani rupee before the end of the year, but given that the international oil markets are still bullish, there are many factors for that. One of them is prolonged cuts by OPEC Plus, hurricane season in the Pacific Ocean, and inventory withdrawals in the US. So I think the international scenario, the international circumstances, the global macro environment is not poised as such that countries like Pakistan can pull off some sort of economic resolution, or they can come up with solutions to their economic problems at the moment. The best they can do, the best we can do right now, the best that can happen at the moment is that we stop it, we prevent it from even exacerbating, from becoming even more worse. There are many reasons to doing that. One of the things that I would like to highlight is to adopt pro-poor policies, so that the extraordinary rise in inflation, food prices, energy prices, those who are at the bottom of the ladder, on the lower tiers, unfortunately, they can be prevented from such mishaps or such unprecedented increases in living standards.
And why would he discuss Saudi Arabia and Iran's peaceful relationship as one of the major accomplishments made? All of us know that it was China that orchestrated, that choreographed, that rather engineered this wonderful diplomatic development between the two sides. Why Pakistan has brought it as a very pertinent point sitting at the heart of his speech?
Saudi-Iran relation is, I think that the reason for Pakistan to mention this is because Pakistan's for a lot of Pakistan's problems and economic ills specifically, I think the economic integration remains the most effective and immediate way as a solution, and that is not possible if your neighbors or if countries that are near to you that also holds a lot of energy reserves, quite critical to Pakistan's own economy, as we import about 70% of our oil and gas needs. Our import bill, $1 billion last time, 25% of it is based on oil and gas imports. Our electricity is made from natural gas and coal. So for countries like us, if we have neighbors like Saudi Arabia and Iran, if they're not at speaking terms with each other, we cannot look at potential or possible opportunities or avenues of collaboration wherein we can get ensure discounted, if not discounted, then we can hedge our bets against the oil prices. We can have some sort of agreements with them. We do already have some agreements with Saudi Arabia, but it is always important and wise not to put all your eggs in one basket. So Iran coming to the fore, and Iran and Saudi Arabia amongst themselves share a huge portion of the global oil production. So if and when Iran is not sanctioned, hopefully in the future, Saudi Arabia and Iran are speaking terms, we can look forward for many railway projects, we can look forward for many energy projects, we can look forward for some technology sharing and easy movement of people, hence creating more job opportunities. So I think and China had a great role to play in this rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So I think it is very important, and I think that was the reason that it warranted a mention in it was quite a significant change in the Middle East, if I may, and it had to be mentioned in the speech.
Osama, you might have heard his concerns about the geo-economic policies. Do you actually see Pakistan increasingly shifting its focus from geostrategic to geo-economics?
Is Pakistan really going towards geoeconomics? I would ask another question, that if that was the case, then why Pakistan was not even one of the countries that applied or showed its interest to become parts of BRICS. And now we have, recently we have added, they have added more countries, 6 more countries, and now it's called BRICS Plus. So if that was the case, I think if geoeconomics was really a priority, in that way I believe that we are lagging behind. And I think I just mentioned Saudi Arabia and Iran. We have done some business with Qatar as well. CPEC, the speech right after the geoeconomic term was mentioned, CPEC came in discussion, but CPEC alone cannot be used as a justification that Pakistan, have moved towards geoeconomics. I think there is a lot that needs to be done in this regard. And I think Central Asian countries being part of BRICS, getting more close to China, finding alternatives in terms of energy imports to Saudi Arab, such as Qatar, Turkey. These would be the signs that Pakistan is truly moving towards geoeconomics.
And Usama, Islamophobia also was one of the major areas that Pakistan for the second time have brought to this wonderful forum. What are your thoughts on the issue of Islamophobia being pointed out for the second time in a row by Pakistan at UNGA?
Islamophobia remains, and this is one of the rare movements where we see a consistency in the overall policies in terms of various governments, even in Pakistan, where this issue has been taken to the UN recently, quite a few times in the recent years. And I believe this was very important to mention because of many things. Once again, speaking about my own field, Islamophobia or things like these, they really affect our export competitiveness. They affect the people of Pakistan of getting employment, securing employment abroad, of securing visas, chances to visit other countries, and overall the general acceptability of our people and our products. And if this issue is addressed, the confidence in our economy can also be restored. If we are absolved, or if we are freed from different allegations, false allegations hurled at us from certain countries, we can regarding the resurgence in terrorism and housing terrorists and misconstrued and unwarranted and ill-founded statements and ideas regarding Islam. I think that can go a long way in improving the overall image of the Muslims worldwide. And I think OIC has to play a very important role in this. We need to sit down and we have to create a meta-narrative, as it is said, and do a lot of marketing in this regard as well, so that the true picture of Islam as a religion of peace and harmony can come in front of the world.
Thank you very much, Usama Rizvi, for being guest in our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with last segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back to the last segment of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, so far we have covered the speech of Prime Minister of Pakistan from perspective of a leader of the people of Kashmir, and from the perspective of an expert of political economy. Let me invite an expert of diplomacy who will shed light on different areas of this speech from his perspective. So don't be surprised if there is a repetition in the question, because there is going to be a very different perspective coming from the respondent. And he is Syed Muhammad Ali, one of the leading experts in the area of modern diplomacy. Ali, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you for having me, SHABAHAT. Always a pleasure.
Ali, Pakistan has once again pointed out or highlighted or presented its vision regarding peace in South Asia. What are your immediate thoughts on it?
Exactly. I think it was a very comprehensive and substantive speech. And most of the stances articulated by the interim Prime Minister are consistent with our long-standing positions. But the timing and the current environment obviously allowed him to focus more on those issues which are right now in the global spotlight. And these four are basically the international disputes, COVID, economic challenges by the developing world and the global south, poverty, hunger. So these are the four challenges that he mostly focused on. And if you look at the structure and the content of his address, he started off and devoted most of his time on the climate change and its impact on the economies of the developing world and the global south, in particular Pakistan. And then he, I think, very tactfully linked these challenges and their very deep impact on Pakistan's economy. And therefore, he raised this argument that that is why the international financial institutions should review the approach and the method through which the economic assistance program is considered and shared with the developing world. But in terms of the more traditional security issues, he obviously focused on Kashmir, India, Afghanistan, and also emphasized Pakistan's long-standing commitment against the threat of terrorism. But he also reiterated our long-standing position regarding strategic stability in this region and called for cessation of the arms race and restraint in developing conventional and strategic buildup. And lastly, he called upon the international community that peaceful resolution of regional disputes in line with the UN Charter, UN Security Council resolutions, and the UN principles is perhaps not only the most effective way to build a peaceful, progressive, and developed world, but also allow United Nations to meet the expectations of the international community in being a forum that actively and substantively promotes peace, progress, and prosperity.
While you say this, Ali, it reminds me that the issue of Afghanistan has also been discussed by the Honorable Prime Minister. Afghanistan, a country that we are not enjoying an ideal relationship with at the moment, yet Pakistan has voiced the concerns of innocent people of Afghanistan who are facing starvation, hunger, and poverty, abject poverty, I would rather say. So how do you think Pakistan has presented the case of Afghanistan at UNGA?
I think he briefly but comprehensively discussed Afghanistan in three contexts. He definitely shared his concern about the revival of terrorism in Afghanistan and expected Afghanistan to meet its obligations and commitments towards the international community and Pakistan in particular. However, he also urged the international community that building a peaceful and progressive Afghanistan is in Pakistan regional and global interest, which requires a revival of international investment and connectivity projects as a means to offering hope and incentives and discouraging and isolating terrorist outfits in Afghanistan.
Ali, were you surprised by Pakistan's consistency on the issue of Kashmir? And I'm saying this because of increasing significance that India has gained being a partner of the United States in this region.
I think he framed the issue of Kashmir in a new, innovative, and somewhat comprehensive manner. And that was, I think, very smart. There are four aspects in which he framed the issue before the UNGA. First off, obviously, since he was addressing UNGA, he reminded UNGA that it's an obligation upon the United Nations and the international community to fulfill their own obligation and legal and diplomatic commitment towards the people of Kashmir, number one. Secondly, obviously, he shared the huge misery and tyranny that the Kashmiris are facing on a daily basis by the Indian occupation forces. So he shared their concern and their plight with the international community. But two more aspects that he added are that the peace in this South Asian region and progress and poverty alleviation of the poor people who live in South Asia also depends upon a peaceful, timely, and amicable solution and resolution of the Kashmir issue.
To my understanding, the Indian diplomat has also tried to respond to it. How was the response? What was the response, and what's your take on the response given by the Indian diplomats?
Exactly, and I think it was disturbing but not surprising, because the response by the Indian diplomat to the Pakistani Prime Minister's address at the UNGA reflected three things. First, the frustration that the India is right now facing, not just because Pakistan has successfully and consistently highlighted its strategic behavior before the international community, but also the recent crisis India itself has created by sending its intelligence officers to assassinate its political critics and opponents in Canada. And thirdly, that it is not able to manage this crisis amicably and diplomatically and successfully. And the international concern, including that of the I-5 intelligence alliance, including the US, New Zealand, Australia, and Britain, is also sharing intelligence and concern and urging India to prove and share its responsibility towards bringing those responsible to justice. So there are three things that that characterize the frustrated response from India, and the key arguments that the Indian diplomat used the UNGA forum to distort and mislead the international community were aimed at diverting the international attention away from the Kashmir issue by misinterpreting the facts and calling Kashmir as an integral territory of India, and demanding Pakistan to give up the territory that India claims to have been occupied by Pakistan, and also blaming Pakistan for human rights violations and support of terrorism. Put the blame on Pakistan and shift the debate away from the human rights violations inside India, the brutal military occupation of Indian forces of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and its growing belligerence and irresponsible strategic behavior by sending its diplomats and intelligence officers abroad to indulge in targeted assassinations of human rights activists and peace workers. So I think the Pakistani diplomat did a very good job and reminded the international community that Kashmir has never been part of India. It is not part of India, and it will never be part of India, because the people of Kashmir have rejected the military occupation of India, and their hearts, minds, and soul are connected with Pakistan and the Pakistani people. And its biggest evidence is that whenever Pakistani cricket team plays anywhere against India, the Kashmiris support Pakistan. They celebrate Eid with Pakistan. When they die, they are wrapped in the flag of Pakistan. So that's an evidence, the ultimate evidence, the heart, minds, and soul of Kashmiris belong to Pakistan. And the brutal oppression and occupation of Kashmir has only deepened their sense of hatred and their quest for freedom from the Indian military occupation.
That reminds me of this, what I call a diplomatic skirmish between Canada and India, which is happening because of the murder of a Sikh who was a Canadian national, and for which the government of Canada believes all the hints are pointing out toward the involvement of Indian government. What's your take on it?
I think it's a very important development in international politics, because, first off, let me share with you as a Pakistani, I'm on a daily basis more impressed and grateful to the strategic wisdom of Pakistan's founders, who permanently rescued the Muslims of South Asia from the Hindu exploitation, hatred, and brutalities by creating Pakistan, first off. And every day, everything that India does within its own territories against all non-Hindus, whether they're Christians, Sikhs, or Muslims, is a proof that the decision to create Pakistan it has been vindicated and proven correct over time. Secondly, what India has done to the minorities and non-Hindus inside its own territories, and supporting terrorism and targeted killing in the neighboring smaller countries, including Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, China as well, is something that they have followed as a policy to destabilize their neighboring countries over 75 years. What has happened this time is that they have gone global and they have overestimated their power and underestimated the wrath of the international community, and particularly the Western, ability to punish India for its irresponsible and dangerous strategic behavior against the international peace and security. So, and the third most important aspect of it is that, frankly speaking, the Muslims and the Kashmiris and the Pakistanis have been, unfortunately, on the receiving end of Indian strategic behavior, hatred, and brutalities for the last 75 years. But the world was not taking due interest in these facts and realities. But once the Christians were killed and their churches were burned in Manipur a few months ago, that made the Western countries take notice that the victims of Hindu hatred and brutalities are not just Muslims, but they're beginning to harm the Christians. But this incident of killing a Sikh leader in the sovereign territory of Canada has really alarmed the Western world and the Western power, and has woken them up that a country that they felt could be a useful strategic partner in the containment of China project is actually in its own interest or hatred is indulging in aggression, support of extrajudicial killing and targeted killing in their own countries. So basically, India is attacking the interests and the sovereignty of those countries which expect India to be a strategic partner. So I think this will lead to a major and comprehensive rethink of the I-5 countries, the Strategic Intelligence Alliance between US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Britain, that the strategic behavior and the nature of India deserves a review. They already are beginning to realize that India's commitment against China must not be overestimated. But now this development that India is involved in sending intelligence agents to assassinate its political opponents in the Western countries is something that will be a very timely reality check for the Western powers. And I foresee a major rethink and review of their defense, technological, and diplomatic relations in the days and weeks to come.
So at this time, is it not a very smart move of the government of Pakistan, of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, to bring Hindutva and the problems that Hindutva has unfolded for the people, for the minorities living in India?
Absolutely. Basically, what India has done in Canada is no different from what it has been doing to the non-Hindus within its own territories and against other nations, the smaller neighbors. If I can briefly share with you, whether it was Mukti Bahani that India supported in former East Pakistan, while Bangladesh, and then it supported Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. It supported the assassination of the royal family of Nepal. It supported Dalai Lama against Chinese territorial integrity. It is supporting BLA and TTP against Pakistan. in Afghanistan. So practically there is not a single neighboring country of India which has not been a victim of Indian interference, destabilization, support for terrorism and targeted killing. But this time, I think they have, like I earlier pointed out, overestimated their power and underestimated the anger and the wrath that the Western powers can employ against India, and to put it in its own place when it has sent its intelligence officers to carry out targeted killing and assassination of its opponents in Canada. And it is just exactly what they did. It was a serving raw officer, Commander Kulbhushan Yadav. I mean, it's the same approach. So this is another proof that it is a long-term policy of India to deploy its intelligence officers in the garb, in the cover of diplomats to organize, plan, coordinate, facilitate, help a targeted killing of its opponents. And I think the world, I'm sure, will not ignore this and will take corrective measures regarding their relations and expectations from India in the days and weeks to come.
Ali, why Pakistan is so concerned about the permanent membership of Security Council? Why Pakistan is afraid of India becoming, or why Pakistan is concerned rather about India becoming a permanent member? Prime Minister didn't name India, but showed a lot of concerns in this regard.
I think there are three things that he hinted at, but obviously he was referring to India. First off, he mentioned that the terrorism which is emanating from Afghanistan against Pakistan also has external support. So that is obviously a reference to India, number one. Number two, you know, like Kulbhushan Yadav I mentioned. So what Pakistan has been facing from India is something what now the world is also facing. And thirdly, India aspires to be a great power, a great Hindu power that can, you know, protect and promote its own value system and interests around the world at the global forums. But I think this incident of Canada will definitely make all the permanent members of the UN Security Council rethink and realize that a country which has been following a policy of hatred and oppression within its own territory and occupied territories of Jammu and Kashmir, which has been destabilizing its neighbors and is now actively sending its intelligence agents to indulge in targeted killing in the Western world. Can such a country with such a track record, with such a policy and such a strategic behavior be trusted with the responsibility of permanent membership of the UN Security Council, whose primary purpose and objective is to promote peace, security and development and help resolve international disputes, while India itself is right now militarily occupying Jammu and Kashmir territory and carrying out operation and has killed more than 100,000 Kashmiris and almost 100,000 Sikhs in the last 75 years, and is violating and in the UN Security Council resolution. And only yesterday, the Indian diplomat on the floor of the UNGA had the audacity to say that the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir is part of Indian Union, and it's an internal issue of India, and the world must not worry about it. How can the international community, how can the UN Security Council permanent members, and how can the UN itself ignore and neglect this grave and consistent distortion of historical facts and UN's own mandate and allow India to become a member of the UN Security Council? I do not think it is possible or likely, and I think India is perhaps the growing and the major threat to international peace and security. And the sooner the permanent members of Security Council realize this, the better it will be, not only for themselves, but for also the UN's credibility and international peace and security.
And lastly, taking advantage of your presence in the show, Ali, why the issue of Palestine is still sitting at the very heart of Pakistan's diplomatic agenda. We have seen many other countries, without naming anyone, I would say, uh, who have not been giving same significance to the people of Palestine as they used to do a couple of decades ago. Why Pakistan's focus toward the issue of Palestine has not changed?
I think I acknowledge the context of your question because raising this and reiterating our long-standing principal stance on Palestine's future obviously must be seen in regard to the recent major geopolitical developments in the Middle East. However, I think there are three reasons why Pakistani interim Prime Minister said and thought it is necessary to reiterate its long-standing stance on Palestine. Number one, Pakistan, not many people know, the founding party of Pakistan, All India Muslim League, not many people know, passed a resolution immediately after First World War in 1918, unanimously rejecting the foreign occupation of the Holy Land of Palestine and particularly Jerusalem. This is 30 years before Israel came into existence. So the principal stance of Pakistan is inspired by this position that the Palestinian land belongs to the Palestinian people, and no foreign occupation, including the colonial British occupation, was also criticized and rejected. So the issue is not Israel specific. Number two, Pakistan's principal stance in international diplomacy and according to international law and UN Charter is anchored and pivoted on the concept of right of self-determination and the people of Kashmir deciding about their future. So if Pakistan takes a dichotomous or contradictory stance on the oldest disputes, oldest two disputes on the agenda of the United Nations, then it will incrementally weaken our moral, diplomatic, and legal locus standi and stance and support on the Kashmir issue as well. If you backtrack on the Jerusalem issue or the Palestinian issue, how will you expect the international community to support you on the Kashmir issue, which has the same basis that the people of Kashmir deserve the right through UN supported, facilitated plebiscite to be given the right of self-determination. The same is the issue with Palestine. And thirdly, the common factor is how can you not ignore the military occupation of the territories of Palestine, Jerusalem, and West Bank when you continue to expect the international community to show sympathy and support for the military occupation of the illegally occupied territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So Pakistan cannot take a contradictory stance on Palestine when it expects the three principles of the right of self-determination, opposition to military occupation, and number three, expecting a peaceful resolution through the support and facilitation of the UN resolutions to bring about a lasting and peaceful final outcome of these disputes. So I think these three things are very important. And lastly, obviously, Pakistan's public sentiment and Pakistan's standing within the Muslim world, not just at the political capitals and forums like UN, but also within the street is unique and precious. And I'm sure Pakistan is conscious of that, and the Palestinian people also expects and appreciates Pakistan's principled stance on to support their future, again on the basis of two-state solution, but the borders according to the pre-1967 borders, with Jerusalem being its capital.
Thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for being guest in our show.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Shaban.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's diplomatic point of view has not changed. Pakistan's different leaders from different political backgrounds, representing different political parties, have always brought same issues to UNGA, which tells the world that Pakistan has a focus on peace, prosperity, and resolution of international disputes through negotiations. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.